so much nationality is what they call the Deutsche Völkisch. I don't think we have an equivalent in the English-speaking world because we don't go back to a different way. So, like it transcends nationality. The German Völkisch transcends nationality.
Okay, actually, as you were saying it, I was going to almost suggest, what if it has to do with the soil and it's geographical? And I heard years ago Robert Bly was one of the other, that poet was one of the other people who used to come to the Man Ranch seminars, so I got exposed to a lot of Bly. And one of his he was a kind of a wise guy and liked to say things to shock people. But one of his shocking things was that you should live within 25 miles of the place you were born because that's where you came up out of the soil, and you must have resonance with that particular spot. And maybe, these myths actually are kind of geographically related.
I think we have to go on to the next question. We have one from Greg Markley. Would you stand, please?
Yes, I recently moved back to Texas after being in Tulsa, Oklahoma for a number of years, and where I was a member of the All Souls Unitarian Church there, which combined with the remnants of Bishop Carlton Pearson's African American Pentecostal Church. Bishop Pearson at one point in time was the heir apparent to Oral Roberts University. He had a church of 5,000 people, and then one day he had an epiphany, and he came back and told the 5,000 member congregation, everything I've been told and everything I told you was wrong. There is no hell. We are in heaven now, and we will all continue into heaven, sinners, saints, and everything all. At that point, about 4,500 people left his congregation, and he couldn't even get his laundry done in Tulsa. But so would you have some comments on his epiphany?
Well, one of my mantra for myself is the goal of all spirituality is to experience being in heaven now. Heaven is maybe there's something that happens to us individually after death. Who knows? There's just absolutely no way to know this. And it doesn't really look like it. It looks like people die the same way the roses fall off the bush and then the bush blooms again next year. And we really are the bush. The mistake is to think you're the rose. And during your life, the more you can think of yourself as one with the bush, that's how you live beyond yourself, realizing that you're going to put out vibes that will affect other people. That's what reincarnation is the vibes that people put out in the past, and we're putting out vibes. I love this idea. Yes, there is no hell, there's heaven, and this is heaven, and the time to find it, as Joe said, the time to find it is now, by living intensely. And unfortunately, religion and belief is one of the things that prevents people from seeing that. And that's really, that's the ultimate tragedy, isn't it? That out of your belief in Jesus and his message of love, you'd end up being a hateful, warmongering. It's just incredible what happens. And I think part of the problems that we are having in modern society is that our religions are not keeping up with the transformation in consciousness that we're all going through. Instead of saying evolution is wrong, the churches ought to be coming up with a way to explain how evolution fits their model of God. It's just ridiculous for them to say, well, that can't be true, and overpopulation can't be real, and global warming can't be real. Jesus is going to save us all. It must be exactly the way the faith of our fathers taught. The world has changed so much. We have to keep changing with it. And such an epiphany is exactly what this new myth is.
Quick editorial comment. The concept of evolution certainly fits with the concept of oneness.
Yes, that is what is evolving, isn't it? And One of the other great influences on me, Teilhard de Chardin, you know, the French paleontologist, Jesuit priest. When I was in seminary, I was a librarian at the novitiate, and as librarian, I got to see things that most of the people weren't allowed to see, you know, because, you know, there were books that were for the priests and there were books for the seminarians. But I got to see, and one of the things was a book about, a little pamphlet thing about Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And that just made so much sense. It makes so much sense that we understand the evolution of consciousness on Earth as part of our experience of God, of creation, of what's going on. There's this Big Bang. God must be that Big Bang, isn't it? Not an old man sitting in heaven judging us, but this huge expulsion of energy, and we are still part of that energy. We are God. And the way you find God, again, look inside.
We have another question from Douglas Bauer.
You've been talking about myths in a concrete sense, but I'd like to also have you discuss the inverse of this, which is myths in terms of things that are not talked about. And I want to throw out two examples. You said earlier in your talk that growing up in the 60s, there was no awareness of a gay culture within the United States. Again, that was something that was deliberately not being talked about. And then going back to biblical times, in the Gospels, Christ makes no mention of homosexuality, even though it was obviously something that was known about at the time because it's talked about in the Old Testament and in other parts of the New Testament. So my question to you, is there any validity to the idea of myths being things not being talked about?
Well, you know, you give me an opportunity in a couple of moments to sort of tie another big idea of mine. And if we had had hours in that PowerPoint thing and kept going, we'd have actually gotten to this some point, which is, Phil asked me to say something about this because June is Gay Pride Month, you know, and Gay History Month, so we're coming in. Let me just point out that, and one of what all of this meant for me as a young gay man in meeting and befriending Joseph Campbell and realizing what religion really was instead of what I had been taught as a seminarian, was that gay people are taught, or we learn early in life to see from an outsider perspective. One of the tricks you have to learn, I think even today when homosexuality is relatively accepted, as a child, as you're growing up, you still are experiencing difference from your parents, and you're having to differentiate yourself from the life that your parents are living and the feelings that you're having. So there is a way in which we, gay people, necessarily learn to a critical distance on what's going on. And it is that critical distance on the nature of myth and religion, which I'm saying is the new myth. And I think the reality, not all gay people necessarily believe all this or understand this, but I think that, and what I preach as gay spirituality is understanding that the gay perspective makes us naturals to understand religion this way. And understanding religion this way frees us from some of those false myths. Clearly that thing in the Old Testament about not having sex with a man as with a woman. Although actually let me say isn't that right? Men having sex with one another should not treat each other the way that men in those days treated women. And isn't that what the rules said? And today, men should not treat women the way people treated women in those days or the way they treat homosexuals. So the rule turns around. There is some truth to it, but it's not, the old myths are full of errors. And the nationalism and is one of those errors. My God is better than your God. Well, thank you for the opportunity to let me get in a little bit about gay perspective, because I did want to say that.
Do you want to take some more time to discuss that? We have time, and
Well, what more is there? Well, let me say just a couple of points. I think that part of gay perspective is being an outsider, not feeling like you don't quite belong, and therefore having to see what other people think and realize that maybe you don't think that. That's an important part of it, a sense of having a secret. Now, today, that secret isn't judged as negatively as it was when we were growing up in the 40s and 50s and, the old days. There is also, within homosexual culture, gay society, there is an ability to blend gender roles, to feel free of gender roles. I'm not sure. I don't, certainly not all gay men and lesbians experience this, but on some level, we don't have to be manly. We don't have to be feminine. We get to be ourselves, and because we don't have any choice about it. Many gay men are a little bit effeminate, and that effeminacy we can see as a beautiful thing. And it's a form of attractiveness, even though the culture would say, oh no, men are not supposed to be that way. You're supposed to keep your, walk like you've got a broomstick.
we have a question from Dr. Phil Richardson.
It's kind of a statement, but also a question. You were just touching on this. It's my understanding that in many cultures, especially the Navajo, the people that are doing religion, in fact, are gay. And certainly in the U.S., we're finding out in the Catholic Church, many of the clergy are gay. Even here we have gay clergy.
Well, it does turn out that homosexuality somehow gives one an insight into religious issues. Some of that may be, and you mentioned the Navajo. I worked on that book with Walter Williams, so learned about Navajo history. Among the Plains Indians, there is this notion of the two-spirit person who they understood that effeminate males or masculine women were like that because they had two souls, both a male soul and a female soul, and that gave you a step up. If you had two souls, you could see things even better than with only one. I want to tell another story real quickly. One of the things Campbell mentioned, the myth of the Bodhisattva. There was that character in the film. There were all those statues going by. Very quickly, the myth of the Bodhisattva is that this character, Avalokiteshvara, made a vow to save all beings and refused to put aside his own entry into nirvana until all other beings could enter nirvana. And one interpretation of that is that he keeps coming back as the Dalai Lama. So within churchy Buddhism, they figured out who this is. But there's a broader interpretation of this myth, which says that when Avalokiteshvara made his vow to delay entry into nirvana until all other beings had entered, all beings entered nirvana, and he remained alone behind to live everybody's future incarnations for them. So Avalokiteshvara is the only being incarnating, and all of you, whether you know it or not, you are reincarnations of Avalokiteshvara, because there's only one of us reincarnating, and it's in everybody. And the reason to be compassionate and moral is because you're doing this to yourself. Recognize that we're all the same being. Well, Campbell says, or Buddhism says, there are three wonders of the Bodhisattva. The first wonder of the Bodhisattva is that he is androgynous, both male and female simultaneously. And in some statues, you'll see he actually has a female breast on the left side and a male breast on the right side. You all have probably got statues of him in the backyard, the Kuan Yin, that a female figure. That's Avalokiteshvara. He usually, as a Buddhist, he sits in meditation with one leg hanging over a wall. The second wonder is that he sees that time and eternity are one. There is no difference, as Campbell said, between here and now and nirvana. This is nirvana now. And the third wonder is that the first two wonders are the same. I thought she was, yay, Lord. Well, that insight to me really did mean so much, that the idea that it is by overcoming the duality that we see that time and eternity are one. And one of those dualities that our culture makes such a big deal about is heterosexuality and the divide between male and female. Part of what's happening in our modern sexual liberation is that we are breaking down these barriers between maleness and femaleness. Not necessarily, and not to produce homosexuals. I mean, this does allow for a way for homosexuals to experience a place within how all this is happening. But this is simply going on because we are realizing that we're all persons and that our personhood comes before our distinction as masculine or feminine.